Hi everyone and welcome to Name Hero. I'm Ryan, the founder and CEO. In today's video, I want to talk about how to change the version of PHP that your website is using right inside of cPanel. Now, all of our hosting packages at Name Hero have the ability to alter the version of PHP right inside of cPanel. Now, if you have one of our VPS hosting packages or cloud dedicated servers, you can also do this on Interworks as well. It's just a little bit of a different setup. So in this video, I'm specifically going to display how to do it in cPanel. And stay tuned, I'll do another video for Interworks. Interworks and cPanel are very similar control panels, but the way about changing PHP is very similar as well, but it is like completely different look and feel. So in this video, I'm going to focus on the cPanel aspect, and then I'll do another one for Interworks. So I specifically want to start with our web hosting and reseller hosting packages, because I'd say these are our two most popular. I wouldn't say they are our two most popular packages at Name Hero. And so before we begin, let's just talk really quick, why you'd want to change the version of PHP on your website. So I would say that, most of our customers, they use WordPress in some capacity or another, or a very similar content management system. So this could be Joomla or Drupal. And if you have a forum, this could be InVision PowerBoard or vBulletin. And so the thing is, PHP often updates. Every year, they reach an end of life of an older version and they introduce a new version. And so, if it's up to me, on my sites, I always try to run the latest version of PHP. So right now, or the latest stable version. So right now that's 7.3, 7.4 is out there and it's very, very good too. But about 7.2, 7.3 is where I like to be. I really don't like to be behind 7.2 at this time. And when I'm filming this video, this is in November of 2019. So we are getting to the end of life of 7.1 and 7.2 is starting to go that way. So we want to start moving towards 7.3. But so here's the thing, as PHP makes upgrades, this includes a lot of new coding classes. It also includes, security enhancements and as well as performance. So your website's going to be more secure and it's going to perform even better. And then if you're a coder out there and you're using plugins for WordPress, the code is going to it's came a long way. There's advancements in it. So especially with like PHP 7.4, there's some amazing things that you can do. So the problem, though, that some people run into is if they're using a plugin or some code that's not written up to standard, up to date for the latest version, that they need to roll back. They're not quite ready to make that jump. And so this is one of the reasons I could say this is probably the main reason at Name Hero why people don't like to upgrade their software. We're all the time saying at Name Hero, you need to keep WordPress up to date. If you're using vBulletin, keep it up to date, or InVision PowerBoard, Joomla, Drupal, or whatever. But they don't want to do it because they're scared it's going to break their website because they're using some custom themes, plugins, or even code that they've written themselves or have had developers write, and it's just not ready for that next version of PHP. So at Name Hero, we make it very easy you can select the version of PHP you specifically want to run inside of your control panel, and then it stays the same until you're ready to change it. And so since you can change it easily, you can change it, and if it breaks something, you can roll it back really quickly. Also at Name Hero, on all of our web hosting and reseller hosting packages, we run the Cloud Linux operating system and use Cloud Linux PHP Selector. Cloud Linux actually has what they call Alt PHP. So these are versions of PHP that are actually released through Cloud Linux's repository, and they are secured and updated by them. So when people say, well, if I run version 5.6, my site's not, secure. Well, if you're running Alt PHP 5.6, it's actually had those security patches applied by Cloud Linux, whereas the PHP community, they stop updating once they reach a certain end-of-life version. And you can just Google right now, PHP, whatever version end of life, and you can pull it up on the PHP's website, and they'll actually show it, when they stop updating altogether. But Cloud Linux, in their repositories, they continually update those. So while I still recommend, trying to run at this point in time at least 7.2 on up, if you still have code that's not quite up to speed, you can, but I would be working towards that goal, especially here in 2020. You want to make sure in 2020 that you're up to at least 7.1, 7.2, really 7.2, I think. But anyways, the point being that you have options and you don't have to just completely rush. We're not going to forcefully update this at Name Hero so your site doesn't go down, and you have this ability usability and this flexibility. And so this is important for resellers to hear too, because if you have customers, they're going to need to know how to do this. And this is another reason why, you know, a lot of customers are leaving some other hosts out there that don't allow this ability, because they feel like they're held hostage. You know, if the host has one version they allow and then they upgrade it on their end, then everything has to be upgraded no matter what. So there's a lot of flexibility within that. So let's log into my demo account, and I want to show you how to use this selector. And I have many videos here on our YouTube channel, but things have been updated. And especially here in 2019, the interface looks completely different than it did 2018. So let's go through it and become more familiar with this new interface. So if you're following along, I'm just going to log into my demo account here. And I want to get into cPanel. So I'm going to click on Cloud Web Hosting, and I want to go to I've got a starter cloud package. So this is just one of our basic hosting packages, our basic web hosting. And this is a small account. It allows for one website. So yours might be different, you know, if you're following along. But this specific version of the tutorial on this video is for our basic hosting and reseller hosting. These are on shared nodes. And so it's different than our VPS hosting and our cloud dedicated. So just keep that in mind. If you have a VPS or cloud dedicated, you're not going to have this option unless you have Cloud Linux installed. So I'm going to go down here and click Log into cPanel. And I'm brought right in here to cPanel. So I think most everyone out there watching, you know, if you're a current customer, you've been using web hosting for a while and have cPanel, this is what it looks like. But I'm going to go on down here to the bottom, and I'm going to look for Select PHP Version. And you can see it's under Software, Select PHP Version. If you're like me and sometimes all this stuff is too much, you can just start typing in Select, and it comes right up. So we'll click it. So you can see this is Cloud Linux's logo, and it comes up. So this demo account right now is running PHP version 7.0. So you can see PHP version is 7.0. And so I can click this drop down, and you can see all these versions. So we have all the way back to 4.4 and all the way up to 7.3. And we'll be adding 7.4 before too much longer. If you need it, you know, be sure to let us know, and we'll see what we can do for you. So PHP 7.0, again, this reached end of life last year, and I had it set to this before this video just so I could show the example of changing it. So if I want to go to 7.3, I just click it, and then I click Set as Current. And it saves. So that's really, you know, that's how I switch it. Now I want to show you how to confirm, you know, that your site is in fact on that. So what I want to do is go back to cPanel's main page. I'm going to go into File Manager, and I want to just go into Public HTML. And so for my site, I want to create a PHP info file so I can access this in my browser, and I can see for sure, you know, what version of PHP it is. So if I head over here to the Name Hero blog, and I can type this in, you know, how to know the PHP version of WordPress on your site. And you can type, you know, a little bit of this in the search box, or type in, you know, how to know PHP version, Name Hero in Google, and this article will come up. And we also have a couple others out there. If I scroll down here, you can see, you know, method 1 is to check cPanel, select PHP version and see it. And of course, this is the older interface. And one of the reasons why that I'm getting this video out, and you know, we're in the process of updating things as we close out another year. If I go down here using a PHP file, so I'm just going to copy this code here, go back to File Manager, click New File, and I want to call it info.php, create, and I'm going to go click on it and click Edit. Click Edit again. I just want to paste that code in there and save. And so now I want to go to my site. So this site's KCMO Wax, and I'm going to stop it because I don't want to, it's a redirect. wax.com/info.php. And I can see it's running 5.6. So you say, Ryan, I selected 7.0. Why is it not changing? And again, I want to show you that. So what we need to do is, it still says it's using 5.6, but inside the selector, we selected very clearly 7.3. So we go back there and we can confirm. PHP selector. And you can see 7.3. So what's the deal? So what we want to do is go back to File Manager, and up here at the top, there's an option called Settings. Click that and click Show Hidden Files, .files, save. click the htaccess file, and we're in our public HTML, and click edit, and you want to take a look at that. So if we look through here, you're going to notice at the bottom, begin cPanel general handler, do not edit. So you can see this website has been specifically set to 5.6. And this is very, very common to see from sites that have been migrated to NameHero from another web host. Now, if we did the migration, we try to make sure we always check that for you. So if you see this, or maybe you uploaded your files, you can simply just remove it. Click Save Changes. Now, if I go back to my info file and refresh it, I see 7.3. So most sites, if you're brand new or just installed fresh at NameHero, it's going to have this on here. But if you migrate it over from another host, then you might need to remove that. So I would say most people watching this video will not have to do that. But it is important, because I'd say that's one of our top support tickets we get when people say, well, the selector's not working. Like, well, do you have code in your htaccess that's overriding it? And most of the time that's what our support team goes into and checks first. But that's just, I wanted to get that out in a video just so you know, and especially if you're a reseller out there and your customers have those issues, that you can check it for them. Obviously, we are here around the clock to help if you can't find that. But now we can clearly see that's the version that we use. So if I go back into cPanel, you can also see below the version of PHP are what's called PHP extensions. And so these are used for specific modules and PHP code that you have on your site. So most of you out there, the default ones that it loads are just fine. But sometimes you might download a plugin and it says you need to enable these PHP extensions, or you might install a piece of software from scratch. I know a lot of our resellers, they install WHMCS, and sometimes before it install, it'll ask to enable one of these. So all you have to do is, if you know the PHP extension name, you just check it on here. So whatever that may be, you check it on, and then it saves. It automatically saves as soon as you check one. So let's find one like Redis. I'll click it here, and that's all you have to do. There's no saving to it. You just click it on. It's important, though, not to enable these unless you know specifically you need it. If you're a coder out there, then obviously you know what they're used for, and so you select as you want. But you wouldn't want to go through here and just check all these, because, of course, that could break your website as well, because some of these might conflict with each other. If you're using Memcache, you could do that as well. But these are what are available to you. Back in the old days, when I had my first hosting company in the mid-2000s, and I sold it in 2005, so it was before then, back in the day, it was very common for customers to say, hey, I need a PHP extension. The old process used to be you got to submit a ticket, and then we actually had to do it on the back end. It had to be done like server-wide, and it was about a 20 to 30-minute process for us to add an extension, and we also had to add it for everyone, not just one account. So the cool thing about the selector here is you can specifically add, just to your website what you need. And if I want to roll back, let's just say 4.4. Let's just see that in action. Gosh, it's old. Doesn't seem like it's that old, but it is old. So 4.4, if I go back here and refresh, PHP 4.4.9. I mean, man, they even put their old school page up there. I haven't seen that in a while. So let's go back here. So I want to leave it at, let's just leave it at 7.3. And I've got a redirect on the site right now, so I don't, it's not a live site, but obviously when you're switching this, you want to go check your site, make sure you did not break it, make sure it still works. If you're using WordPress, log into your WP admin, make sure you're not getting the white screen of death. So that's the next piece of this tutorial. Well, where do I set things like my memory limits, my upload limit? Well, if you go to PHP options, so it says switch to PHP options. If I click that, that's where I see that stuff. So these are things that historically, and at some other hosts out there, you would create what's called a PHP any file, and you would do this inside a file manager or inside your FTP program. But at NameHero, using the Cloud Linux selector, you can easily just check the items you need here. So like, allow URL if open, it's selected. And once again, a lot of themes, a lot of plugins that you install or download, they'll tell you, you need to have a memory limit of at least 128 megabytes. And so this is where you set it. And, once again, if you don't know what this stuff is, leave it default. But if you specifically know what you need to change, this is where you go do it. Again, the most popular is like the memory limit. So if we look here, it's set to 128 by default, but I could take it all the way up to 512. And you just have to select it and it saves. The max input vars. Some themes I know out there, they want 10,000 instead of 1,000, so I could change that. If I go down here some, the post max. This is another common thing, is people need what they post. If they're posting data, sometimes this can even go into uploads. They need it higher than 8 megs, which is the default. So 64, I think, is a good number to put it at. You can go up to like 512, but really most of the time the browser times out before then. And then, of course, that upload max file size. The default is 2 megabytes. That's way too small, so I like to set that to 64 as well. So as far as upload max file size goes, if you're using WordPress specifically and you're uploading images to that WordPress, that means anything below this number won't upload in the browser. It'll tell you to upload or update that value. So I'd say these are the most common: the max file size, the post, the input variables, and the memory limit. Those are some of the most popular items that you need to change. And just like the PHP version, when I change it, I can check it on this page, and I can make sure that my upload max is changed. So max upload, let's see, upload. So max file uploads, upload max file size, 64 megabytes. So you make sure it's changing along with it. And again, if it's not, then you need to go back and look in my htaccess. Is there something in there that is preventing that change? And most of the time that's what we find if this is not updating. So you should see this set in real time as you edit it inside of the PHP selector. Now, sometimes it's worth noting, you always need to check up a level in File Manager and make sure you don't have an htaccess file up here. I know a lot of sites we migrate from HostGator or other EIG companies, and sometimes they have a htaccess file above public HTML, and it's not always recognized. I'd say that's one of the most common things we get in migrations when we bring site accounts over from EIG companies, is they have that htaccess file above the public HTML folder, sometimes in both places. So make sure that you do check both. And likewise, if you have a subdomain, I don't think this domain doesn't have one, but if you do have a subdomain, go check the folder that subdomain is in. Make sure, if you have an htaccess file, that you're not seeing anything from inside of there that would note that it's changing the version of PHP. I like to keep these files as clean as possible. Only have the stuff in htaccess that I know is needed, not to add a bunch of junk. And if you've had your site for a while, some of my older websites from back in the day, have been around for 20 years, and so you like to evaluate these files, especially when you move hosts, is a good time to make sure that all the stuff from your old host is out of there and not inside. Okay, so what I've highlighted thus far is for our basic hosting and our web hosting customers. Now, let's say you are on a VPS or you're on a cloud dedicated and you do not have Cloud Linux, but you still want to change your version of PHP. You can still do that. So inside of cPanel, there's a version, and cPanel added this in, I think it was about last year, when they made Easy Apache 4 available to pretty much everything, and people got away from Easy Apache 3. There's a section in here called Multi-PHP Manager and Multi-PHP Any Editor. Now, these should not be used on NameHero's web hosting or reseller hosting accounts. We're actually in the process of pulling these out of all of our servers because that have Cloud Linux. Because you should use, if your server uses Cloud Linux, you should use this Select PHP version. But if you do not have Cloud Linux, you will not have this. So you should use these two options. Now, I made sure they're enabled for this tutorial because if you do have a VPS with this, or you have a cloud dedicated that does not have Cloud Linux, but you still want to select the version of PHP, this is where you would go do it. So if I go over here, you can see that this specific site here is set to PHP 5.6. And if I click, and that's earlier what we saw in htaccess, but I could actually click the domain and I could change it here to whatever is on the server. And so you can see these are all the versions of PHP that are on the server. And so if I wanted to go to PHP 7.2, I could. Now you'll notice this, since this is a server with Cloud Linux, it's got the alt PHP. And so that's Cloud Linux's repository. So if you see this, this means you have Cloud Linux installed and you should use the selector that I've already shown. But if you don't have Cloud Linux, you won't see Alt PHP. You'll see these EA PHPs, and this stands for Easy Apache, which is standard and free on all cPanel servers. So that you would want to select, one of these versions. So 7.2, is the latest, so you can apply it like that. And when you do that, you can see it sets. And then at that point in time, that is what you're using. Now, since I selected this on this server, I'm going to go into my PHP info file and you'll see, well, actually, it did not change it there. Since we already removed that, it didn't change it in here, and it's going to remain the same. So it's deemed useless on this server at this point in time. But just like I edited the selector for my upload values, my max input values, and all that, I would do that here. So I go back to multi-PHP any editor, and this is where I would do that. I would select my domain, and here. So the same options that you would see in Cloud Linux's selector are over here. So like the max input vars, 1000, memory limit, 32, and here you can just edit it and then click apply, and then that's how you would do it on that type of server. You can also go to editor mode, and you could pull up this is just a fresh file because the any file does not exist. So you could edit it yourself. Only do that if you're familiar with writing a PHP any file. You can use basic mode. I think is the best way to go about it because it writes that file for you in proper format. But as I said, this should only be used if your server does not have Cloud Linux. Now, to a point I made earlier, Cloud Linux has those Alt PHP versions. So these are not Cloud Linux versions. These are Easy Apache. So these are dependent on the Easy Apache versions, being updated and secured. I can't speak for them as I can for the Cloud Linux one. So just keep that in mind as well. The EA PHP 7.2 is different. That's not from Cloud Linux. That is actually from the repository of cPanel. So keep that in mind about how that's done and kind of the differences between it. And I think that most hosts nowadays out there that don't have Cloud Linux have this enabled as well. When we started Name Hero, they didn't even have a multi-PHP selector in cPanel. So I'm glad to see cPanel kind of moving along with it. I'm still a huge fan of Cloud Linux for the security, as well as their features like CageFS and a bunch of other stuff that Cloud Linux has. So this is where you need to do it on our basic hosting, our reseller hosting accounts. If you have Cloud Linux on our VPS, which you can order a Cloud Linux license or our Cloud Dedicated, you'd want to do that here. But if you don't, then it would be one of these two. So if you do have a shared hosting account with us, web hosting reseller, these two icons will be depreciated shortly out of our interface. Like I said, we're in the process now of getting all of those removed, so you won't even be able to see them, but I did enable for this video so I could kind of show both ends of the spectrum. So that's really how it's done. I will mention that one other thing that sometimes we see in support is the extension you want is not in here. And sometimes there is one that has to be installed at the server level, so you can always reach out for that. And also, if I go to PHP options, sometimes there's an option you need to set that's not in here. And you can, of course, log a ticket with us as well, and we'll go in there and set that specifically for you, whatever that value may be, if you don't have the option to do it in here. The last thing before I close this video is, once you've verified it with this info file, it is important that you remove this file. You shouldn't leave this on your server because, look, this shows all the information about PHP on your site or on your specific account or server, and it could help an attacker intruder to gather information about your server or setup that could allow them to do some nasty stuff. So I'm just going to go back to File Manager, my info.php, and I'm just going to click Delete. I just want to make sure it's gone. And it's really any file out there that you're not using, you should delete it for security purposes. So make sure you do that. And then we go over here, refresh, and make sure you can see it's gone. It's no longer there. So you want to make sure that that's the case with your site. If you're uploading a PHP any file, make sure you remove it afterwards or put it in a password protected directory at least, because it can be a security threat. So that's how multi-PHP works here at Name Hero. You have many options. As I said, I'll do another video for our Interworks customers, for our VPS and Cloud Dedicated. This is huge flexibility though, and this is great if you're a reseller. This is a huge selling point. If you use WordPress, you know how it important it is to be able to switch versions of PHP, because when a new version of WordPress comes out, a lot of times they won't even work with older versions of PHP. But then if you're still running plugins or themes that are a little bit old, you've got to go get those and download them from your developer or wherever you bought the stuff from. And it's not always an instantaneous process. So we have the ability to select as you go along. Now, once you do select it inside the selector, it's selected, so that's not going to be changed. Any server update here at Name Hero, we will not go in there and forcefully change that. So, it's set until you change it otherwise. So just keep that in mind as well. That's some questions we get. So if you have any further questions, or if I didn't highlight enough stuff in here, feel free to ask them. I'm going to put this on our YouTube channel, of course. I always say too, give us a thumbs up if this video helped you out. And if it did not help you out, give me a thumbs down. I look at those because the thumbs up, I know that I probably need to go into more detail. So the more thumbs up, I know you're enjoying this material and it's helping you out. Or if you're a reseller, it's helping your customers, and I'll continue to do more. If I get a lot of thumbs down, then I know, well, maybe it's probably not useful. Maybe everyone watching knew, and then I can tailor accordingly. Regardless of your option, whatever you decide to select on, I do ask that, or I recommend or suggest that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. YouTube's a place to where, we release a lot of the information there first, even before the blog, because we'll upload videos and I'll film videos and upload them, and then I'll write blog posts later on about them. So if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, as soon as we upload a new video, you'll get a little notification, and then you'll be the first to know. And this is specifically nice when we have big sales, because I know Black Friday and Cyber Monday is coming up, and we have really big sales on those days. And a lot of times those sales are limited to the first 100, the first 200 customers. And so if you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you'll be one of the first to know when those come about. So just a little plug for that. But thank you all for watching and your support of us here at NameHero.com.